So I want to level set a little bit before we get started, because when I was looking at the title of this, I thought they're all going to think we're going to help them write a plan for a child. We're not really going to do that. What we're really going to focus on is why, and you've heard this probably in every panel, why it is so important as leaders that we are attending to the relationships across sectors and bringing people together. So we're going to start with kind of a big overview of what's happening around the initiatives in California related to children and youth. And then we're going to dive a little deep into the ACEs Aware initiative. And our friends from King County are going to talk about that.
I can just project my voice. Cornelle Jenkins, Director of Strategic Initiatives of our California Alliance in Child and Family Services and our Catalyst Center. Been here for about a year and a half, was an attorney in a previous life. Please don't hold that against me. But I've been loving the nonprofit world and working with Chris.
Good morning. Good morning, Everardo Legaspi. I'm an Assistant Director for the Kings County Department of Public Health for about 6 weeks now. Feels like 6 years. Yeah, thank you. Prior to that, I was a program manager, and me, along with Daisy, led the effort for the ACEs Aware initiative in Kings County. Prior to that, I was a domestic violence advocate, working in the legal area for about 8 to 10 years, with about 4 years somewhere in the middle as an operations manager for a biotech company, so a varied experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Daisy Lopez. I'm a Senior Director of Program Services with the California Health Collaborative. We're a statewide nonprofit organization headquartered in the Central Valley. And I've been working with Lalo for some time here since 2020, but it also feels like maybe 6 years. My background and experience is in policy and systems change. I've been working with a nonprofit for quite some time, working with young people, especially to be able to pass different policies in their communities that would help protect young people and help create healthier communities for them and their families.
A quick story, when we originally put in our proposal, we had a completely different group of people. I think I might have been the only thread between the people who were going to be on this panel and the people who are. And I think it's so representative of why it is critical that we build relationships across sectors and that we can do it quickly. Sometimes you don't have months. You have to figure it out. So we have had 2 meetings on Zoom. We met each other in person this morning, and we're still going to rock it. It's going to be great. Because you know what? We like each other. And we learned from each other just sitting and hearing both personal and professional stories. So I just think that's a thread we have to keep alive. And I know Melissa talked about breaking down barriers from the point of view of the state. But we have to do that in this room, right? We have to know who each other is and who to call when we need them. So I just want to, this is a slide I put together probably 6 months ago because I was so completely overwhelmed and confused. And people were saying, Chris, what's that initiative? And what's that one? And what's this one? And what do they do? And where's the funding? And help me out. I don't understand it. And I was like, this is why we are all a little exhausted, besides the pandemic. But wow, what is happening in California? How many people in this room, just looking at that slide, could do a semi-deep dive into any one of these initiatives and tell me what it's about and how it's funded and what it's trying to achieve? Anybody? Amanda is over there going, maybe.
Don't be modest.
Don't be modest. Yeah, this is a time to shine because we need you. You're going to come up on Ken. Okay. But this is a reflection of why it is so critical to have cross-sector collaborations, leadership, discussions, because nobody knows it all, right? CalAIM is an entire effort around changing the way that Medi-Cal works, who it touches, how it's funded. And being able to really understand that is a whole body of work in and of itself. The ACEs Aware initiative, which you'll hear a lot more about, is very, although it seems to many people to be very focused on the medical field because that's where the training is happening, the fact is it is about cross-sector collaboration and working with all community partners. The Family First Prevention Services Act is sort of housed in social services, but again, is all about how do you get services to children and families early on to keep them out of the child welfare system. All of the investments in school-based mental health, I know you're hearing about community schools, and you'll hear a lot more about this when we talk about the field guide in the next session. So many opportunities there, but also, again, so overwhelming to try to understand. And then, of course, you heard Melissa talking about the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative. And it is so important that these are all working together. And we are not just thinking about one piece and how it works and being experts over here without at least understanding or having an expert at your side who can explain how the other initiative is working with it. Otherwise, we'll never get to where that vision is, both Elizabeth's vision for breaking barriers and the vision that you heard from Melissa this morning about how do we make sure that no child is left behind. We have to do everything we can, and it's not just about money. Sometimes it's about who can I call? You know, when I was struggling with my middle schooler who had special ed needs and was also facing racism in his classroom, I didn't know until probably 5 years later that Elizabeth Estes was on the other side of the school district that I was about to sue saying, hey, y'all, we got to work this out. That's why we're besties now. But like, we didn't even know each other, but we were everyone was focused on how do we get to the child's needs and put that first. The funding has to come second, and we have to keep beating that drum together. Otherwise, we're all going to get in our corners, and we're going to say, yeah, there's a lot of money, but it has to be used this particular way, and I'm not going to try and, question that. We have to be working together and fighting against what our normal silos that we work on are, right? Okay, that's my high horse. I am going to now turn it over to Cornelle, who's going to give you a little bit of an overview of the ACEs Aware initiative and how that fits into this picture.
Yeah, and so I won't go too deep into the ACEs, but I will kind of give some recognition to the original leaders of the ACEs Aware movement, Dr. Burke Harris and Dr. Karen Mark, partnered together to really, their goal was to cut down generational trauma in half in one generation, toxic stress in half in one generation. And their mission has been going fairly well so far. We can go to the next slide there. And here's the ACEs Aware mission. I don't have it memorized, so I will read it for you. To change and save lives by helping providers understand the importance of screening for adverse childhood experiences and training providers to respond with trauma-informed care to mitigate the health impacts of toxic stress. The original mission, which has kind of expanded since then. We can go ahead to the next slide. Since then, it's been taken over by Dr. Thine and Dr. Mocktinger. I think I pronounced that right. Hopefully he's not here. No, okay.
Doctors in the
No doctors in the room, that is correct. So UCLA and UCSF have combined to take over the ACEs Aware initiative and kind of expand its reach. And by expanding its reach, they've incorporated what they've called triads. We can go ahead to the next slide. And so with the triads, the focus is not just on those 10 scientifically proven ACEs, because those ACEs didn't really take into consideration some of the other traumas that youth face when it comes to racial trauma, gender identity, things like that. And so the triads have expanded that by looking at the adversity, those original ACEs, the current distress, so any distress that you're in, witnessing community violence, witnessing domestic violence, racism, things like that, and taking those into consideration in order to really focus on all the things that cause youth to be in distress. And I have it here written down because I can't say it all, but they have expanded trauma-informed healthcare from biomedical focus on disease and dysfunction to bio, psycho, social, spiritual focus. And you can add education and all of those things in there. And just in that word itself, you have to see cross-sector collaboration. You have the biology, you have mental health, you have social circumstances, you have spiritual and faith. And so that focus alone lends itself to cross-sector collaboration. We can go to the next sector. And so looking here is kind of their, their new, kind of the mission that they have here. And so obviously we have the screening, we have the response, and we have the education. So the screening has to be trauma-informed, making sure that it's culturally aware, it's sensitive to the people that you're screening to get the most out of them. And then you have the family engagement and connection and education. And again, it has to be in a way that elicits a response and makes the youth or the person or the family feel comfortable. And the most important part here for our purposes for leadership is that foundation. And the foundation of, and we don't have any medical doctors here, so hopefully you can take this back to your community to share this with them, but having that leadership inside of these medical clinics that have the buy-in, having interdisciplinary teams in-house to help build these community partnerships in order to provide the youth and the families the services that they need. Going to use Jordan from the Maxwell family as an example. Jordan is 17 years old, in high school, half black, half Hispanic, takes care of her family, but indicates that she has some mental health concerns, part of the LGBT community. And in my experience, when we see these young women of color who are taking care of their families, who are doing these things, we say, oh, they're strong, they're resilient. Look how much they can carry, look how much they can hold on, look how much weight they can put on their shoulders, when really underneath there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that are unaddressed. There's a lot of things that they're afraid to speak to because of fear that their families will not take it well, or for fear of just not being heard. And so in order to really get to that, again, the trauma-informed screening practices that have to be put in place and have to be bought into from the leaders of the medical fields, you need to really get Jordan to open up. Get Jordan, hear her story, listen to her story, and then also understand what you can do in your community in order to help Jordan. And so a lot of the traditional, mainstream mental health services may not be what's appropriate for Jordan, but mentorship could be. Peer partnerships, having organizations that with people who are like-minded, who have similar experiences to her. These are all things that you're not going to typically see in your doctor's office, but if you build those partnerships with the community, you can realize what strengths there are out there that you can kind of leverage in order to really help Jordan out. And so, seeing as there's no medical doctors here, I'm asking all of you to really look at the partnerships that you have with those in the medical field. Do you have relationships with leaderships of medical clinics or Medi-Cal clinics in your facilities? Do you have an opportunity to go to them and express the services that you could offer or the services that you are aware of that you could help them link someone like Jordan to? And so that's ultimately that's the most important thing, is building those relationships from the top, because we can have systems change. And systems change from the bottom up is possible, but it's very slow. So in order to really have that systems change, we need buy-in from the people in this room, from the people running those clinics, from the people running those mentorship opportunities, and making sure that we can give Jordan the services that she deserves.
Right. And I'll jump in here. If you look at this slide, you'll see just some examples of organizations that are working to address social determinants of health. So we have a little exercise for you all. Look at these slides. Think about in each of those boxes, one person that if you were working with either a family you're working with now, maybe one you've worked with before, do you have one person in each of those boxes that if you needed them, you could call? Oh, is it hard to see? I'm so sorry. Apologies for that. You mean you all don't have this on your phones? Community members is the first slide, is the first box. See, we're not on Zoom. That's the problem. You would be able to see it on Zoom. I'm just kidding, Elizabeth. State, local, and federal agencies, behavioral health partners, health care partners, technology, education, faith-based organizations, and community-based organizations. And since it's hard to read that, why don't you just at your table for a couple of minutes talk about who it is you know in your community that's not in your department or in your agency that is a go-to person for you, that when you need something, you know, hey, I can call that medical person, I can call that faith leader. Who is it? Technology, great example, thank you. Where else do you need to work on your cross-sector collaboration? Where? Faith-based. Excellent. Yeah. Do we have any faith leaders in this group, by the way? No. Anywhere else we need to work on your leadership and cross-sector collaboration? Those are the two that come up. Okay. I realize I forgot a slide, and if you'll be patient with me, I'm gonna go back to it. Oh, actually, it's not here. This must be our original version, y'all. I wanted to think with you a little bit because I know we wanted to focus on this one family, right, and how it all works together. So if you look at these initiatives, and you think about this particular family that Breaking Barriers asked us to attend to, I'm curious where you see this family getting services in these areas. Is there anything that the CalAIM initiative, for example, can do for this family? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I'll tell you one of the things that it does. It ensures that managed care organizations that are providing health care also find ways to support families in housing and getting financial support and things that really do impact their social determinants of health. There is something that's called enhanced care management and community supports, and healthcare organizations are going to have to provide those services or contract out to provide those services. That is the first time in California that has ever happened. And it's literally, that process now is happening as we speak. Healthcare organizations are contracting with community-based organizations for the first time ever to provide those services. Now, it's going to take time, but over time, this family could benefit from that through their healthcare provider. Similarly, and Cornelle talked a little bit about this, all the investments that are happening in school-based mental health will impact those children. Jordan, Eric, they may be seen at school in a different way than they are otherwise seen in their family. And there could be peer-to-peer supports at their school through these initiatives, because it'll be the first time those kinds of things can get funded broadly. They could see a counselor perhaps for the first time, because there's so much more funding and attention to mental health in schools. And as Cornelle talked about, there's a huge emphasis, you heard it from Melissa this morning, around equity and the fact that we have to be attending to those who have historically been underserved and unattended to, and that has to be at the forefront of everything that we're doing. So it's important as you look at these big initiatives and you as leaders start to figure out, how do I take that funding, braid it, blend it? You got to pay attention to what that family needs first and how you're going to connect the dots from the money to the child. So you have that one child, one plan. That is the vision of this entire conference. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Lalo to talk about the incredible work they are doing in Kings County.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and just start off here by, if you see on that slide there, these are all the organizations that initially were part of our leadership core team that helped launch the ACEs Aware initiative in Kings County. So you can see we have 3 of our largest Medi-Cal providers, which are healthcare organizations there in Kings County, as well as 3 different nonprofits, and then we had the county health department, and then we had a local organization that was committed to doing evaluation and helping to support us in that early process. So just kind of want to highlight them because this work couldn't have been done without those partnerships. And you can skip past our photo since we already,
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay, so when we first started reviewing the request for proposals for ACEs Aware, it became pretty evident right away that it's a fundamental change in the way medicine is practiced, in the sense that, you know, doctors should not necessarily talk to their patients over their shoulder and ask questions, but do what a lot of us do as advocates when we're working with clients and whatnot, which is, you know, turn your body and ask some questions that are difficult to ask, right? You can't do a PROS assessment, which is the assessment for ACEs, without touching on family violence, substance use disorders, incarceration, divorce, you know, things that are difficult to discuss and really should not be asked over your shoulder, right? So considering the prevalence of ACEs just overall in the community, I mean, I'm sure if we started taking scores here, we would all have possibly at least one, some of us as high as 10 ACEs, right? Which goes to the point that Cornelle was making about Jordan, and even though she presents as highly functioning and whatnot, we don't understand what sort of trauma is going on and the impacts of it, right? The ACEs-related health impacts, which include even the way your body reads and writes DNA. You know, to me, that sounds rather extreme, and it's a large impact. So when considering that, it was obvious that it was going to take multifaceted approach, that we were going to have to consider everything that was already being done in the county and reach out to as many people and providers as we could. And we started working on building our trauma-informed network of care.
So in 2020, we started reaching out to different organizations. As Lalo had mentioned, we recognized that we couldn't do this alone. Even with 8 core organizations, it wasn't enough to serve the entire community of Kings, given their ACE score. The data was showing us that there was such a high need. So we originally thought, you know, you create a meeting, you bring people to the table, they're all going to come. They didn't come initially. We recognized really quickly that there was a lot of work to be done to really break down silos, establish relationships, create those partnerships, respect people that had been doing this work in community for a long time. And we're feeling kind of left out of the equation when we're saying, you know, we're coming to teach you about ACEs, and they're thinking, well, I've been working with young people with ACEs for a long time. So we really needed to establish those relationships, really build on a formal leadership structure. That was something that was really important to us early on, that if we wanted this to be sustainable over time, it needed to really have that leadership structure. It needed to be organizations that were going to be committed past the funding. We all need to stay committed to this work. We needed to understand and document what available resources were already available in our community. So when doctors started screening, we weren't just left with, you know, what next and where do we send them? We recognized really quickly that we needed an inventory of what's available, what's still in need, what do we need to still look out for? Is there funding out there that we can bring in some more resources into our community? And how do we start to have those conversations with folks so that we all are on the same page, we're all speaking the same language? We also needed to establish referrals, workflows. There was all these things that kind of came into play that none of us really expected until we were really in the work. And we're recognizing that, you know, people in the clinical setting, were going to be screening and needed to know, well, what's the process to do it in a way that's very trauma-informed, in a way that doesn't re-traumatize folks, in a way that is really supportive of their needs and what needs to happen next. We needed to hold each other accountable. We leveraged technology. We're going to talk a little bit about how we use technology to also create those relationships and talk to each other about what resources were going to be provided to patients, and how do we know if patients actually receive the resources? How do we make sure we're all communicating? And then at the end of this, we needed to consistently be ready to evaluate, refine, and keep learning from this process, because we walked into this with a certain expectation, and then by the end of it, I mean, even today, it still looks different. Every day it's evolving. Every day we're learning something new about the network of care and how we're having it function, and we're learning how to make it better, to better serve people in community.
And, just briefly, to the point of why, the anxiety that Chris mentioned about meeting in person, this is different, and this is what we had envisioned initially before COVID started, right? So this entails something different. You have things at your table, you collaborate with people and whatnot. What we did, since we couldn't have that in-person engagement, we created engagement boxes, which we sent out to participants prior to the meetings, to the networks of care, which included a lot of materials, clinical algorithm cards and whatnot that helped just entice people to participate. And we have some numbers, I think, as to the numbers of people that are participating. So I just wanted to mention that you do have to think outside the box. You have to be creative. These boxes are really popular. Any of my colleagues that have received them, they have quotes all over them. They actually keep the box on their desk. So just wanted to point out that it really did take a lot of creativity. And I think that is reflective in the number of different participants that we have, as you can see on the slide. And some participants, obviously, local and county government, well, I was part of that, yet the health department. So we consider that maybe it fit better under healthcare, Medi-Cal. But, there's different organizations that can fit and meet different needs of the people that we're working with. And it's important that you consider all of these different sectors as partners or members of that network of care, because they really are. And like Daisy mentioned, a lot of them were already providing some of this care, right? So there's been services for domestic violence survivors for decades and whatnot, which is an ACE. There's counseling available and whatnot, yet it hadn't been framed as a part of a whole initiative called ACEs, right? So it's just bringing these people in and acknowledging the work that was already being done.
So you can just see here just some of the early infrastructure, the projects that we had to work on. As we were saying, we're still a work in progress. We don't feel like we're completely there yet. I don't know if we'll ever arrive somewhere and just say, this is it. We built the most effective network of care. We're learning. We're constantly going and kind of adjusting and shifting. We've created community toolkits, as you can see there. We had a community toolkit that went out to community-based providers, anybody that was providing information out to community members to learn more about ACEs, learn what was happening with the screenings, what doctors were going to be looking for when they were going to do the referrals. We had a clinical toolkit that was for providers that were looking at developing those clinical algorithms and what happened next and what happens when a patient scores high on an ACE score, what do you do with them after that? So we created those initial materials. We ended up having tons of webinars. As Lalo mentioned, this happened during the pandemic. It was right in the middle of it. We were expecting that we were going to have some in-person opportunities to train folks, but we ended up having to go completely digital. All those trainings are still available now to our community. They can still access them on a learning platform that we were able to secure. And then we had to build up the referral exchange. That was our digital platform. We worked with our local Kings United Way, who had been working on, I'm not sure if 211 is also accessible here, but 211 is a number that people can call and gain access to resources. And so they actually helped us develop what we call the Kings County Referral Exchange. And this was a way for Medi-Cal providers to actually be able to document patients that were getting the ACE screening and that were going to be needing resources, and that the community resources providers can also be included in that digital platform so they can communicate with each other and that we can know that a patient isn't just being screened and then left, high and dry. They needed to be able to be connected immediately to those resources, and we needed to know that there was going to be follow-up. That's still a work in progress, as we've said. It's been really exciting to see it develop, but I'm kind of one of those people, I'm like, do it now, I want it to be ready. But it takes a lot of buy-in, it takes a lot of relationship building. We're convincing folks to join the platform. We've been doing what we call demo days. which I thought was demolition days for when we first started, but they're demonstration days. And so we've been having folks come, learn about the platform, make sure that they recognize that it's not going to be extra work for them, teaching people in the clinical settings how to use it as well. So really building up, we're really in those early stages of really building up that infrastructure for folks to know that we can make this happen as a community. We can put in the work. It's not going to be a lot of extra steps.
So, we talked about this a little bit, but the core leadership team, and it continues to expand and contract, right? People change positions. A lot of things have changed since COVID started and since we started this process. But even as recently as our most recent meeting, we had a doctor from Valley Children's Hospital join. They don't have a presence in Kings County in particular. They're in our neighboring county in Fresno, yet she's been participating in our network of care events. We've had people from Bakersfield, from Kern County, ask if they can license our products, some of the things that we produce through this, which obviously we provided to them for free, and they can just change their name and whatnot. So it's important to have different leaders come and go because they bring different perspectives and different connections and different things to the team. And as far as leadership, we take turns hosting and facilitating those meetings. Decisions were pretty much all made as a group. It wasn't anybody leading the team or making decisions for everybody. We really, it's an example of collaboration. And, and honestly, even in preparing for this presentation, Daisy and I had dinner because we just needed to connect and talk about the work that we've been doing and we've been so passionate about. Because we both have been leaders in this, and I feel at the same level. And everybody that we bring in, we gets treated with that same respect. So I think that that's important. A lot of times, government entities feel that they have to have the responsibility to take on the lead, or kind of push people into taking roles that they may not necessarily be ready to take on. That's not necessarily the case. And I think that the outcomes are indicative of that. That you can always just let other organizations, other entities take the lead, and ultimately what's important is better outcomes for the people that we're all working to serve, right? If you keep that as your objective, right, what's going to benefit people down the line? And we're 4, 5, 6 steps away from actually working towards that. We're still building that network of care and making sure that we're all communicating. Still just keeping that objective in mind really helps to gel the group and leads to better collaboration.
And so just to kind of leave you all with just some information about where we're at now, since 2020 to now, we've trained over 600 members of our community on ACEs. They've been taking the ACEs core training, which is available through the ACEs Aware Initiative, as well as just trauma-informed care training and evidence-based buffering supports, how they can connect folks to those resources. In terms of screenings in 2020, this is one of our providers, so we still have 3 other providers that we didn't get their data for this presentation, but this is one of our providers to show you an example. When we started this, they had only screened 1,600 people for ACEs, and in 2021, their screenings had already increased to 11,000, and they were the ones that was the most advanced in getting people connected to resources immediately. The other clinical providers, we had them take it slower because we were still gearing everybody up. We wanted to make sure that the infrastructure was set. Of these patients, you can see about 7% of them immediately were sent off to a behavioral health appointment in the clinical setting. And then of the rest of the folks that were identified, they were sent to 211 to get additional resources. So either it's food or housing or other behavioral health supports or school services. We were immediately connecting folks to resources. And then lastly, you can see those referrals there. We started with 4 core leadership organizations. We now have 8 leadership organizations. We're all unpaid, unfunded organizations. We're paid through our jobs, but we're not paid through a specific initiative, which really, for us, was a proud moment because we figured that once the funding was over, maybe everybody would just kind of separate. But no, everyone's been there at the table. They're committed. All of our organizations continue to participate. And then lastly, we have 102 partner organizations that are now a member of the Kings County Network of Care, which is really exciting for us because we see this as a better way to serve the community, a better way to serve young people in our community and their families.
And those organizations are all over the gamut of the services that people need, including trauma-informed yoga, behavioral health providers, food, housing,
Mindfulness.
mindfulness practices.
few different providers are doing mindfulness practices now in our community, which is really cool.
We had our most recent event at Storybook Garden location, so, just to show outdoor activities, other mindful activities, things you can do, so. And I guess just in kind of wrapping it up, a big reason why we continue to participate as a health department in the network of care is because there's a lot of other things that are coming up, like Chris mentioned, like in particular CalAIM, equity work and whatnot. We're getting funding from the state to address equity, right? Which is like a couple hundred years of issues with a few $1 million. Got it, we'll take care of it. So it's important that as a health department that we collaborate with everybody that's at the network of care. Part of equity work is putting together a equity council made up of community-based organizations. Well, that's already been in place as the network of care as we approach and address Public Health 3.0, right? As the health department becomes more of a chief health strategist and whatnot, then definitely it's going to be all the community-based organizations, all the partners, everybody else that's present in the community that's going to be providing a lot of these services and helping, improve outcomes and cutting ACEs in half in one generation. When I worked in domestic violence, we definitely talked about like ending domestic violence, right? I wanted to work my way out of a job. That would be a great day to show up one day and like, hey, Lalo, everybody's, loving each other and everybody's safe. You can go find another job. That would have been amazing. I still have some years left in my career and I still hope to accomplish some of those things, which would be addressing ACEs. So we have several initiatives. CHC continues to do a lot of work in the community.
Yeah, I think just to kind of close off, this has led to a lot of our organizations just identifying different ways to better serve their community members, better serve families. Our organization, for example, we adopted a trauma-informed training policy, so every single one of our staff members had to get trauma-informed training, make sure that the way that they're serving community members was appropriate. And we're having our team members create just so many creative strategies to how to better serve families, how to get more buffering supports. We're doing a lot of stuff now with access to nature, making sure young people get out to our natural resources across California. Just really being able to take this initiative from what it started and really growing it to say, there's so many ways that we need to be better serving our community members and our families, and how do we each take a little piece of the pie? And so everyone in our community has really been taking that on, which has been really exciting to see.
And here we have some promising practice, some lessons learned. I won't read them to you unless you can't read them. Can you read them? Oh, no? Okay, so I guess I will read them to you. First, we have creating shared leadership and cross-sector collaboration needs to be rooted in a mutual respect for the knowledge, resources, and experience of each partner organization. Partnerships across fields, disciplines, and industries are necessary. No one can do it alone. And at the root of both of these is the fact that when you come into a cross-sector partnership or cross-sector relationship, bring your sector expertise, but take off your sector's hat. You're coming in there to create a new system and to work together. So bring the knowledge that you have, but you need to think more globally and be open to learning and receptive to other ideas from other sectors. And as you can see here, we have 2 blanks. And I'm going to ask 2 people to fill in the blanks. I know you all have worked in cross-sector relationships. I'm assuming, at least somewhat. What are some of the best practices and lessons that you've learned to help facilitate and really have effective cross-sector partnerships?